a lot of these things we could certainly replicate. You could eat large amounts of folate, go outdoors more, mitigate your volume on an MP3 player and just get tuned into the fine frequencies of nature to enhance hearing rather than getting an ear implant. You could eat high amounts of lutein and zeaxanthin and carotenoids and spend time outside, shooting a bow or hunting or hiking or doing things that allow you to focus on objects both near and far rather than, say, getting chlorophyll injected into your eyeballs, which is what some of these folks have done. Or you could learn how to read the sun and read the stars and get a little bit better idea of how to just know intuitively, as our ancestors would have, where true north is, rather than getting a compass installed in your body. And so, there are so many other examples, but really, I think it's pretty commonsensical. You look at what someone's trying to do as a hack or as a shortcut, and there's typically some kind of natural alternative that a lot of times I think is a better choice, and a choice that allows you to develop a more intimate relationship with Mother Earth.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Hey guys, I'm Hilda Labrada-Gore, and this is episode 185. Our guest today is Ben Greenfield. Ben is one of the most influential individuals in the health and fitness world. He's the author of New York Times bestseller Beyond Training and the Christian Gratitude Journal. A podcaster, blogger, and coach of elite athletes and CEOs, Ben has helped thousands improve their performance and health. Ben brings to us today some of his insights about how to improve our health relying on ancient wisdom and, yes, biohacking as needed. The term biohacking is basically just shorthand for pursuing health using modern technology and science. Ben has a firm grasp on both worlds, the ancient and today. In the conversation, he covers everything from the importance of getting sunlight and grounding to some of his own personal hacks that he uses to mitigate exposure to radiation while traveling, not to mention his biggest dial mover when it comes to his own health and fitness. Before we get into the conversation, I want to tell you about something I'm really excited about. It's the opportunity to spread wise traditions around the world. I am personally retracing the footsteps of Dr. Weston A. Price by taking a trip to Australia this September. I'm going to conduct interviews, make presentations, collaborate with health experts down there, and it's all about looking to the past for good health today. You guys know that there is a worldwide health crisis. So many people are suffering from mental and physical degeneration. I am committed to making the work of Dr. Price more well-known since it is so health and life-saving. And you can basically go with us by partnering with us in this initiative. I'd like you to go to the Indiegogo campaign, Retracing the Footsteps of Dr. Weston A. Price, and give a financial gift of any size. Because just like in the U.S., you guys, Australia is being swept up by a wave of fad diets and anti-raw milk legislation, and people are suffering the consequences. So help us challenge the status quo by shedding more light on the work of Dr. Weston A. Price. So please help us by contributing a gift of any size. I'll put a link in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. Thanks in advance for your support of this amazing initiative to retrace the footsteps of Dr. Weston A. Price. Together, we can help this world get healthier through the power of wise traditions. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Ancestral Supplements, the makers of Gallbladder with Ox Bile. Based on the ancient wisdom of like supports like, they put New Zealand-sourced nose-to-tail organ meats and bone marrow in convenient gelatin capsules. Order yours today at ancestralsupplements.com. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Ben.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Hilda. Been a little while since we chatted.
I know, and I'm so happy to have you here because to me, honestly, you are like the ultimate biohacker. You're self-experimenting and looking to optimize your health with all kinds of things. And at the same time, you really appreciate ancestral living. And I kind of am emulating that because I love both worlds. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you see in the biohacking world and what you see in ancestral living and how they complement each other?
Oh, there's a lot of places we could start, but when it comes to the biohacking world and where to actually put your energies, I would say that the biggest thing we can get out of this whole realm of technology and hacks, so to speak, as silly as that word sometimes is, would be using it as a way to approximate natural living, natural and ancestral living. And what I mean by that is, let's say you know that you need the near and far infrared from the sun, and also the blue light and the UVA and the UVB spectrum from that to a certain extent, but you're relegated to being indoors, or you live in Seattle and Portland or some other area where you're not getting a lot of sunlight. Well, that's a perfect example of a situation in which you could use better living through science to approximate sunlight. So now we see companies making so-called photobiomodulation panels that would emit near infrared and red light that simulate the spectrum that you get from the sunlight that you could have in your office or your bedroom or your basement. And in a similar fashion, we see things like infrared saunas. Many of them are full spectrum, such as Sauna Space or Clear Light, where you can actually get into these saunas and not only get kind of a heat effect that gives you that hormetic response that our ancestors might have experienced while hunting outdoors in the heat of the afternoon, but you also get the sunlight response. Now, granted, you're not getting much of the UVA, much of the UVB, much of the blue light or some of the other spectrums, but there are ways around that too. I mean, there are companies that make glasses or in-ear devices like the retimer glasses or the human charger in-ear devices that kind of simulate what you're getting when you step out into the sunlight. That can be used to help to regulate your circadian biology or your circadian rhythm when you travel. Let's say I'm going to a conference in Las Vegas where they pretty much engineer that city to keep you from going outdoors, and I've got to go give a talk, downstairs in the conference room of the hotel I'm staying at. I know I'm not going to get out into the sunlight. I want to regulate my circadian rhythm, so I'll put in, something that kind of simulates sunlight onto my body, like an in-ear light-producing device or an eye-producing or a blue light-producing eye device, right? So there are different ways we could simulate the sunlight. The same could be said for grounding or earthing, right? We know our ancestors would have walked outside barefoot or let's say wearing animal skins on their feet, perhaps camped outside, slept outside, been in much more intimate connection with trees and rocks on the planet Earth and the frequencies emitted by the planet Earth than we might experience nowadays. However, there are companies that produce, biohacks such as pulsed electromagnetic field devices, right, or PEMF devices that can emit the same natural healing frequencies as the planet Earth might emit, but are things you could say stand on while you're indoors at your cubicle, or there are PEMF mats that you could lay on your bed, like the body balance mat or the pulse centers unit, and you could sleep on a mat on your bed, even in a high-rise condo, and be getting some of the same natural healing frequencies as the Earth might emit. We look at water, right? When you drink water from a clean spring, it's charged up with hydrogen. Usually, it's structured, meaning there's kind of a crystalline lattice-like structure to that water that we don't get from a municipal water supply, where water is sitting in pipes or in cisterns, and you lose a lot of the structure of the water, and a lot of that hydrogen gas dissolves off. But you could get yourself like a structured water generator, and you could even purchase hydrogen water tablets and drop them into that water, or get I have a hydrogen water generator called a Trucy in my basement, and so not only does my well water go through a structured water generator, but then that water gets placed into a hydrogen water generator. So I'm getting structured hydrogen-rich water that very closely mimics, using biohacking, what I might get from a spring. So there's the example of light, there's the example of earth, There's the example of water. I mentioned the example of heat, and perhaps another hormetic stressor that our ancestors would have experienced quite frequently would be cold. And that's where, let's say you've got your makeup and your hair done, and you want to get some of these benefits of cold thermogenesis, but you don't have time to go swim in an icy cold river or lake. Well, maybe you're going to use one of these like cryotherapy chamber biohacks, where you get in, you get your 3 minutes of quick super cold exposure, and then you're out, but you're kind of tapping into something that from a primal standpoint kind of charges your body and increases its stress resilience. So there are a multitude of other examples we could delve into, but hopefully that kind of helps you wrap your head around a little bit more about how a biohack could be used in a manner that kind of mimics what we might be getting from a natural standpoint. That's not to say you don't go out in the sun and you get a photobiomodulation panel, and you never go outside barefoot because you have your PMF mat, and you never go out in the heat of the afternoon and sweat because you have your sauna, and you never go swimming in a cold lake because you have a cryotherapy chamber club membership. It's like, you should always try and use the natural version as much as possible, but let's face it, we live in a post-industrial era. A lot of us are stuck working indoors at computers or inside offices. And so sometimes the ability to be able to use some of these biohacks, even while we're working, right? So you're kind of multitasking and maybe have a light panel on while you're typing away at your computer, or during a night of sleep you just flip on a PMF mat, or you go and do your reading for the day inside an infrared sauna. So you can simulate a lot of this stuff while you're just living your post-industrial existence.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Some people might be listening and thinking, oh, this all sounds, out of reach for me. Well, if it is out of reach for you, it's just the biohacks or kind of the modern science pieces. What's not out of reach for you is that the natural bits that you were talking about getting outside, about, getting the sunlight, about jumping in a cold lake, those things are within reach for most people, right?
Well, I would imagine. I mean, it's pretty rare, even when I travel, and I travel a lot to, some urban place, like let's say Los Angeles or New York or Miami, that I still can't hunt down, like, a little grassy spot outdoors in my hotel to stand barefoot, or dial the shower water into cold, or even, dump some ice from the hotel into the bathtub and take a nice little cold bath at the end of the day, or hunt down a sauna near my hotel, or, get out into the sunlight when I can. I mean, save all my phone calls and make them from the outdoors of the hotel rather than from my hotel room. I mean, if you're creative, you can simulate a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also understand this because I'm thinking a little bit about supplements. In other words, the Weston A. Price Foundation, we're all about the wise traditions and getting that nutrient-dense food, let's say liver, for example, which is just a superfood really in our book. But maybe not everyone can get a hold of liver from pasture-raised animals. So in that case, we would say, it's fine if you need to get a supplement of desiccated liver, because that's maybe not optimal, maybe not local, but you're doing the best you can wherever you're at.
I do that. I have like travel supplement kits that look nothing like what I'd supplement with when I'm at home. Like, I don't use probiotics at home because we eat, kimchi and sauerkraut and pickled ginger and homemade yogurt, and I don't take desiccated liver capsules when I'm at home because I've got Braunschweiger and head cheese and liver from, an animal that I've bow hunted or whatever the case may be. But when I travel, I've got a little Ziploc bag and it's got soil-based probiotics and desiccated liver extract, and a lot of these things I'm not getting from my diet when I travel, because it's just, it's harder to hunt down good grass-fed liver when you're walking through the Chicago airport.
Exactly. And let me talk to you a minute about traveling, Ben, because I've heard a lot of people say that we're really exposing ourselves to really high levels of radiation flying beyond the Earth's atmosphere. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it is true. You get a lot of radiative damage when you travel. I do certain things when I travel to help with that. Not only do I do a lot of the grounding and the earthing and the PEMF that I just talked about, along with plenty of sunlight and clean water, but there are certain compounds that can help to minimize some of the effects of radiation. One would be, for example, astaxanthin. Using a supplement like a fish oil that's got astaxanthin in it at the range of about 10 grams or so, that can help out with some of that radiative damage. Another one would be like a really good full spectrum antioxidant powder, or even like a Whole Foods vitamin C based powder, like, American Nutraceuticals vitamin C, or the Chinese adaptogenic herb complex, Tian Chi, or any of these things that are like really dense herbal or plant-based sources of antioxidants that help you with a lot of that radiative damage. And then also glutathione, or any kind of sulfur-based compound or supplement like N-acetylcysteine, can also be very, very helpful in ramping up your own endogenous antioxidant defenses, and those are all things that are kind of part of my personal jet lag protocol, or my personal kind of airline damage mitigation protocol. And you can, of course, also keep the curtains closed, or the shutter closed on the airplane, so you're not getting exposed to the high amounts of UVA radiation that come through. Try not to use Wi-Fi in the airplane. Try to keep your cell phone off. I realize everybody else, or half the plane, is not following that rule, but regardless, you can at least mitigate the exposure to the radiation or the EMF that's close to you, where you're at. And there are companies that make what are called scalar energy devices that emit a frequency that it appears, based on initial research, may be somewhat protective against the EMF and ELF radiation you'd get while traveling. One such company is called Blue Shield, and they make these little devices that you could put in your pocket or into your purse that can help a little bit with that as well. But, a big part of it is the fact that you can't escape some of the issues when you're flying, and so it's more a matter of kind of mitigating some of the damage once you land. You can also decrease some of the potential for inflammation by simply being smart from a nutritional standpoint when you travel. I typically fast on an airplane, or if it's a long-haul international flight, I'll eat minimally, and usually from kind of a more ketotic source, like a handful of macadamia nuts with a little bit of beef jerky, and maybe some spirulina or chlorella, which are both really good for oxidative damage as well. Or I'll use ketones. There are new supplements called ketone salts or ketone esters, and those can activate some of the pathways that limit the amount of inflammation that can occur during travel. And so, there are certain things that you can put into your body to kind of shield up your defenses.
Wow, I just am amazed at the breadth of knowledge that you have about all these supplements. Is it trial and error? Is just running in these circles that you run in? Like, how did you come across all of these ways of which you could shore up your body or mitigate the EMF damage?
Well, I consult with people from all over the world online, and I'm constantly getting questions from them that I need to research. I coach about 10 people full-time, mostly executives and professional athletes, who I help out with their sleep and their nervous system and their diet, and so I'm constantly solving problems for them that pop up. I have a podcast where people are answering questions that I have to figure out how to solve. And I read about a book a day, and typically in the range of about 5 to 6 research articles per day. So I'm kind of immersed in this from a variety of different angles. It's just, and that's, that might sound exhausting to people, but for me, that's my job, in the same way that someone might go to the bank and work at the bank all day and learn about finance. I go to my office all day and learn about fitness and nutrition and health. And then my master's degree is in biomechanics and physiology, with an emphasis in nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals. So I've studied a lot about, kind of the interaction of certain compounds within the body.
Coming up, Ben tells us the end game, what the point is for all of these biohacks and his knowledge. And he also shares with us his biggest dial mover for optimal health.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Are you dealing with digestive issues? Do you react to delicious sourdough bread and other starches? Do you pay dearly when you eat cheat foods? Mike, the Heal Your Gut guy, also suffered from these issues even when following Weston A. Price dietary principles. Mike will show you the extra steps he took to heal himself and how he helps many others take care of gut issues like Crohn's, colitis, IBS, SIBO, and Candida. Mike will show you how to heal your gut 100% naturally without drugs. The Heal Your Gut Guy YouTube channel page has the videos you need to heal your gut. You don't have to walk a dietary tightrope. Just search for the Heal Your Gut Guy on YouTube. You'll find tons of free information rooted in the laws of Mother Nature and ancestral wisdom. and gallbladder with ox bile by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements offer New Zealand-sourced nose-to-tail organ meats, bone marrow, and gallbladder with ox bile in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Our early Native American ancestors would commonly take a buffalo, cut it open on the spot, and eat the warm liver seasoned with gallbladder and bile. The bile was sprinkled on various organs and glands as a condiment, the way we might use mustard today. Word has it that gallbladder and bile did a lot more than just improve the taste. Gallbladder, ox bile, and liver provided concentrated amounts of gallbladder-specific building blocks, bile and liver that support our biliary tract, the gallbladder, liver, bile ducts, and such. And they are now absent from the modern diet. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. And so, Ben, that's amazing. And I'm glad you love it because you are helping so many people through your podcast, through your articles, through your research. It's fantastic. And I wanted to ask you two questions. One is, what do you see as the end game here? Is it living forever? Is it not aging? What do you see as the end game for yourself or for most of your clients?
The ultimate combination of health span and lifespan. There are certain things I don't do because I don't want to live a long time but be miserable. Like, I don't fast as much as a lot of my friends who are doing 6 to 8 hour compressed feeding windows, because I just don't want to live till I'm 120 and be hungry half my life. I don't avoid things like high amounts of weight training and kind of anabolic amounts of protein, because I like to have muscle and I like to go out and do things like Spartan races and athletic competitions that, might kind of sort of fly in the face of longevity. Because, traditionally, gladiators and warriors and athletes, they're not the folks who are living a long time, right? It's like the yogi, Chinese medical practitioners who sit and don't eat much. But I just don't really want a life like that per se. So I try and strike a balance between longevity, but also just adventuring and performing and living life to the fullest. And then part of it also is, my goal is not to live a long time, just to put another feather in my cap and try and outcompete other people in life and try and make as much money and collect as many cars or have a big home or, have as much sex or whatever, carnal pursuit one might want for living a long life. I just want to be around as long as I can to make the greatest impact on the planet, to live out my purpose as fully as possible. And, whether that means living till I'm 100 or till I'm 120 or whatever my genes mixed with my choice of a healthy lifestyle allow me to do, I'm happy with that.
Mm-hmm. That sounds amazing. I think that's what most of us really want. If we dig deep, the carnal pursuits might attract for a little while, but what we really want is to make the biggest impact and live lives of significance. So that sounds wonderful. I'm with you on that. I wanted to ask you now about just a couple of the most extreme biohacks that you've heard of, and what are some ancestral living ways we could, achieve what those people are going after. For example, I've heard about cryonics, right? So what are those people after, and how can we achieve that in a more natural way?
Cryonics involves freezing one's body or freezing one's head after death to somehow preserve your neural tissue in an attempt to be able to replace that in an existing body once that technology becomes available. And I'm not sure that's something we can replicate unless we step back and look at this from an overarching perspective. And we see a lot of indigenous cultures and hunter-gatherer societies with a far greater emphasis and appreciation for caring for the elders and telling stories, right? Passing on generational wisdom and honoring the elders from which that wisdom came, not shoving our mothers and fathers into hospice, but bringing them into our homes and taking care of them, spending more time at family dinners rather than on devices or just spread across the four corners of the city and never getting together as a family, having traditions at Christmas, traditions at Easter, traditions at Thanksgiving, whatever holidays your family celebrates. And that's really a way, if you think about it, you're preserving yourself in a different way than a cryogenic freezing, but you're simply passing on your wisdom to future generations, honoring your elders, and also preparing your children and your children's children. And you could say the same thing about, building a family trust, looking for and purchasing some kind of land and building an appreciation in your family for living near other family members rather than living this so easy to live, nomadic lifestyle where you don't have roots and you don't have your own local culture and you don't have that ability to be able to build your own kind of, plantation, so to speak, and set up roots in a certain city. And so, we look at a lot of these indigenous practices and they allow us to build future generations and almost allow ourselves to live on through those generations. I even went through a process last year called the Life Book, and I blogged about this on my website. If you go to bengreenfieldfitness.com and search for Life Book, I basically went through 12 different sections of life, from finances to relationships to social life to love life to character and emotions, and I just mapped out what I hold dear in each of those categories, the books that I find to be most helpful for those different categories, the lessons I've learned and quotes that I love for each of those different categories. So it's kind of like me in a book that, God forbid, if I were to get hit by a bus, someone could hand that book to my twin boys and say, hey, here's your dad in a book, everything he stood for, everything he believed in. And sure, it's not like they're giving them my head in a jar, cryogenically frozen, but, it's similar. I'm able to live on that way rather than through science. So that's one example. And when you look at biohacking historically, it comes from a movement called the grinders, and they treated their bodies as what they called wetware, and they would implant hardware in the body, whether that's, magnetic chips that allowed them to interact with the electronic devices, chips that allowed them to communicate almost telepathically, or, compasses in the chest that allowed one to kind of know which way they were facing, that vibrate every time you face true north, for example, or electrodes in the ears that allow for being able to pick up higher frequency magnetic fields and hear a little bit better. And, a lot of these things we could certainly replicate through like you could eat large amounts of folate, go outdoors more, mitigate your volume on an MP3 player and just get tuned into the fine frequencies of nature to enhance hearing rather than getting an ear implant. You could eat high amounts of lutein and zeaxanthin and carotenoids and spend time outside, shooting a bow or hunting or hiking or doing things that allow you to focus on objects both near and far rather than, say, getting chlorophyll injected into your eyeballs, which is what some of these folks have done. Or you could learn how to read the sun and read the stars and get a little bit better idea of how to just know intuitively, as our ancestors would have, where true north is, rather than getting a compass installed in your body. And so, there are so many other examples, but really, I think it's pretty commonsensical. It's you look at what someone's trying to do as a hack or as a shortcut, and there's typically some kind of natural alternative that a lot of times I think is a better choice and a choice that allows you to develop a more intimate relationship with Mother Earth.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. I agree with you 100%. And I'm just thinking about the beauty there is in that ancestral wisdom of replicating ourselves and in the sense of passing on to our children and our children's children who we are and what values matter to us. That's much more beautiful and poetic and creative. It kind of taps into a side of us that isn't going to be captured by just the physical body, right?
Exactly.
Hey, well, I wanted to ask you, what is one of the biohacks or even natural living practices that you've incorporated into your own life that kind of surprised you with its efficacy and beauty?
I don't know about beauty. I'm not a very beautiful person. But I would say, a lot of different directions I could go there. I honestly think, that one of the biggest dial movers in my life is not a day goes by that I'm not doing some form of cold exposure, because there's so many benefits, from the increase in nitric oxide production to the big increase in your heart rate variability and your vagus nerve tone to your stress resilience to your conversion of white adipose tissue to brown fat to the decrease in inflammation. When I travel, like I mentioned, I will sometimes fill a bathtub with ice and hop in there for a little while, or I'll take what's called a hot-cold contrast shower with 20 seconds of cold and 10 seconds of hot for 10 rounds for a 5-minute shower. I've got a cold pool out in the forest behind my house, and I'll a lot of times just go jump in there, a couple times during a day, almost like a cup of coffee for the whole body, so, except a cup of cold coffee with the same cognitive enhancing effect. There are companies like coolfatburner.com that make like ice packing vests and waist packs that you can wear to simulate the same effect if you're just stuck at your computer working. But I would say cold is probably one of the biggest things that I use to enhance my own physical resilience. It's something I started to use just back when I would be training for adventure races and I'd have to be cold for a long time at night or have to, go through icy cold water, and I wanted my body to be more prepared. But even though I'm not doing as many of those kind of masochistic events anymore, it's still something I've retained as kind of just like a must-have in my own life. And every new client I take on, within a month, I've got them doing cold showers and cold soaks and just tapping into the power of cold. And in many cases, I've also got them in the sauna, 4 to 5 times a week, or doing some kind of intensive sweating or infrared exposure. And that 1-2 combo is just, it's gangbusters for detoxification and for a lot of the other elements that I just talked about.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've been getting into it myself recently, and I'm surprised at how strong I feel. It builds my resilience and my discipline and my sense of kind of unstoppability, which is really fun too on a mental level, in addition to all of the natural enhancement it does for my body, which I love. But I have a question for you. I've always wondered this. So I get how a lot of ancient cultures had sweat lodges and have had that, kind of ambient temperature or sweat tradition as a part of their culture, but I don't see which ones have had the cold as a part of their ancestral traditions or culture.
Oh, there are
Do you
many.
know yeah, talk to me.
The Native American Cherokee Indian tribe used to ceremonially dunk their babies in cold water up until 2 to 3 years old to enhance their stress resilience and the strength of their immune system. The Icelandic population, even to this day and since the 60s, have been, taking their babies outside in strollers and allowing them to sleep outside in sub-zero temperatures for their naps. There are South American cultures that did very, very similar things to the Cherokee Indian tribes and would immerse their children in cold water, again, when they were very young, to enhance the health of their immune system. The Russians, the Finns, a lot of Eastern Europeans build these big smoke saunas near icy cold lakes and rivers or the Baltic Sea, and they'll do the sauna, but then they'll go back and forth from the sauna to the cold, dry themselves off in the cold, then go back into the sauna. And I've had the pleasure of going to places like the Finnish Men's Society and engaging in those practices with them, and they attribute a great deal of the Finnish men's longevity to that type of sauna practice with the cold. And then, you can even go Google the YouTube videos of the Siberian school children, and they'll have them during recess, like go outside into the cold in their underpants, dump cold water on themselves, and come back inside and drink hot teas and bone broths to recover. And that's how they keep their immune systems up when they're at school. So yeah, there's a lot of cultures that use cold.
Yeah, and I think I've heard some of these stories before, so it's fantastic to hear them again. And actually, I've seen that video on YouTube of those children, and they all just look so rosy-cheeked and hale and hearty. I don't think it's just from that momentary switch from, cold to hot or vice versa, but it's rather, it really is boosting them physically on a cellular level, right?
Yeah. My kids saw that video, and as soon as they saw it, because I showed it to them in the winter, the next morning they were like running outside in their underwear and just playing out in the snow in their bare feet, because they suddenly realized that, hey, if the Siberian school children could do it, I can do it too.
That's fantastic. Hey, well, listen, we need to wrap up. So I just want to ask you the question I often pose at the end. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Read my new book that's coming out in January. That's one. I actually
What's it called?
It's called Superhuman RX, or Superhuman Prescription. It's not out yet, but it's like 600 pages, just jam packed with a ton of this stuff for body and mind optimization. And it's even got spiritual practices like gratitude and silence and solitude and fasting and relationships and sex and all sorts of stuff in there. But that's going to be. I think there's like a landing page up at superhumanrxbook.com. And then in addition to the cold showers that I recommended, I would say some of the biggies would be get outside every day, lay down in your backyard with your shirt off or your shorts off, or if you've got enough privacy, completely nude, be in the sun and earthing and grounding simultaneously. Get really good, clean, pure water regularly, whether you're using findaspring.com or whether you're using a biohack like, a structured water filter along with hydrogen-rich water, which I think is really the best 1-2 combo for water. And then finally, if you're able to play around with near and far infrared light spectrums, like get an infrared sauna or hunt down a health club that has one, or get one of these photobiomodulation panels that produces near and far infrared light. It's just so great for hormones, for collagen, for thyroid, and that's another thing I use just about every day. I could go on, but those are just a few of the biggies.
Well, that's wonderful, Ben. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for having me on, Hilda.
All right, I'll see you soon. Our guest today was Ben Greenfield. Check out his website, bengreenfieldfitness.com, for all kinds of resources. And I'm Holistic Hilda. Partner with me on the Australia trip by going to the Indiegogo campaign, retracing the footsteps of Dr. Weston A. Price. For the complete show notes for this and all podcast episodes, just go to our website, westonaprice.org. And that's it. Let's keep in touch, everybody, and I'll see you next time.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.